So those here and those who are watching, we'll start off. It's really important. The most important thing actually is the state of mind that we come here with. Typically everything we do, as you know, is for some sort of pleasure, because we identify pleasure as happiness. You know, most of us do. So, so you think about it, you know, even thinking about coming into the room, we looked for a comfortable, you know, the right place to sit, right? And so our life is really spent, you know, not to lecture on this part, but our life is really spent, if you really analyze and really think about how your day went today, for the most part, unless you're very mindful, or if you're like me, then not so mindful, that that we go from moment to moment, from the Buddhist point of view, as very unconscious. Okay, not very aware, not very mindful, if you want to use that word. And what will we be mindful of or aware of is, first is, as you know, Buddhism is, you know, is I was thinking, if I could say this, a religion of psychology. But I don't know if that's an oxymoron. Does anyone know if religion and psychology can go together or can't go together? Okay. Well, anyway, it's a system of psychology. Okay. And so our goal here, of course, our goal is to become happy, and we're going to get deeper. We get deeper into that. That's sort of a basic way of saying it, you know, very simplistic. But we have to first be very mindful, very aware that that is what our life is about. You know, so people here, we've talked about this. It doesn't mean we have to go into depth. But if you think about how your day went and what you did and how you spent your time and getting up, getting a cup of tea or coffee, having your breakfast, or not having your breakfast, even if you didn't eat, it was probably because it was the same idea, to feel good. So, you know, it's amazing. People didn't eat maybe because they're on a diet and they want to feel better because of losing weight or eating particular food. It's amazing. Each moment is spent like that. Every moment, even this instant right now. Even this instant. Because if in this instant, if there's some discomfort, we'll do something to be comfortable, won't we? We'll react. If we get an itch on the arm, then you'll scratch it. So that's our life. That's our life. It's sad. But that's where we're changing. Okay, so the idea is we are going to, the idea in Buddhist thought is we take control of our life. That's basic. That's really the essential point. We take control of our happiness. And some people don't like hearing that. Many people don't actually get drawn to Buddhist thought right away because it seems easier to give it up to God, the universe, right? Or if you're not a religious person, you know, give it up to the government, right? Giving up to our partner, like a concept of marriage and family. Yeah. So we have to look at this, okay? We have to look at this as becoming our own therapist. To be your own therapist means to be Buddhist. That's really what it means. Okay, not all this other stuff. Don't have to worry about all the other stuff about taking refuge in Buddha and wearing robes or, I don't know, being vegetarian and meditating. All that is just for the purpose of understanding our psychology. Okay, so we got to stay really disciplined. Okay, so let's just think for a second. So for a few minutes, or for this hour, 2 hours, let's just instead of, so of course we want to be happy, we want to feel good. That's okay, but maybe, you know, what happens is when our life is driven that way, then we feel thirsty, and then feel good. You drink something, and then that experience is finished, right? And then you go to the next one, like maybe watch some TV, okay? Maybe take a nap, whatever it is. So if you see that those are very, very, very momentary, okay, so we have the ability, and this again, it goes back to some Buddhist psychology, that what we do is we believe that in terms of the way the mind functions, every instant is leaving an imprint on our mind or on our consciousness. So even what we're experiencing this moment is an effect, is a ripening of an imprint. even what we're experiencing now. Okay, and particularly when we feel very emotional, angry or happy or whatever it is. Those are all imprints arising. So where did those imprints come from? Okay, they came from us, from our past. So the whole idea in this psychology is, if you want to feel good, create the causes. And the causes are not physical. They're not actually physical. They're psychological. They're mental. Okay. Of course, there's a connection with the physical, but it's not dependent really on the physical. So then we take this. We spend some time together. So just think about having an imprint on your conscience. So we'll just think about that, instead of just stumbling in here and going through the experience, and then it gets to 9 o'clock, and then we go home, that sort of thing, and we don't even know where we spent the 2 hours. We don't remember it. Tomorrow we won't remember this hardly at all. So there are imprints for these 2 hours. Those will ripen, for sure. I can't say when, but they do ripen for sure. So now you can. It's a little bit like, yes, definitely the money goes in the bank. But what we do with intention is we are going to describe what we want that money invested for. Do we want it invested in a college fund, right? Towards a house? Or are you going to just spend it? See, usually we just spend it. So it goes in and we then spend it. Okay. So now so just think for a moment, how do you want these imprints invested? So just make that determination that this time we spend together, maybe our whole life, of course, but at least this hour and a half or so, that all these imprints will ripen in order to create the most healthy, balanced mind in ourselves, in order that we may also be of assistance to others. If we're a wreck, we can't help others. So just motivate like that for a moment. So now, no matter what happens, we've invested this time in a result. Okay? Okay. So I was asked to... this series of Ask the Buddhist Therapist is experimental, but it should always be experimental anyway, But it's not a traditional topic. And so and Urs and Margaret, we've been asking people to please let us know what would be useful topics. So we did 2. The first time we just talked generally about psychology, I think. Then we did 2 meetings on anxiety, right? And then I was asked to speak about grief and loss. Okay. Is anyone presently struggling with grief and loss at the moment? Okay. Which doesn't... I was going to say, the rest of us will be. So, grief or bereavement, I looked it up. Old English word, befirfian, I guess that's how it is. To deprive, take away, or be robbed. Okay, it's definitely connected with what we're talking. It's definitely connected with our experience. Okay. There's many kinds of robbery, deprivement. What was the other one? Taken away, loss. So I don't want to just say we're just only talking about the loss or grief of death, or loss of a loved one, because we should also be aware that we experience maybe other levels of grief, right? Throughout, in other contexts. People can have a really, really hard time losing a job. And we have a really, really hard time when, let's say, like, our parents become, their personality changes, or their health changes. right? It's the same sort of helplessness that we often feel, as with death. One's home, losing one's home is huge. Moving away from your home, having to move to another whole other area. So when I said neighborhood, I mean it could be neighborhood or your culture. Think how hard it is. It's like some people, I have to be so careful because people are watching all over the place. So I can't let my political views seep out. I have to remain neutral. It is very hard to do. Maybe I don't have to remain neutral. I just have to be respectful. But with the political situation for many people, that's kind of a loss. It's kind of a death. A lot of fears come up for people. Just okay, even part of it, like healthcare. If we watch what's been happening for those people, maybe us too, but anyway, when you look on the news, there's a lot of fear, isn't there? A lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. Why? Unknown about the future, right? There's anxiety about that. And then if you actually say it's, if they actually lost their health care, then they would, now they're just worried. It's like death. You know about death, but you're not dying yet. So then what do you do about your death? What do I do about my death? We're going to talk about that. But it's a little bit like, if you want to become really good at losing your health care, then you'll be really good at getting ready to die. Okay? So you have to judge how ready are you. Okay, which is what we're going to talk about. So it's a loss of anything that we value, I guess you could say. We could say that there's grief, right? Bereavement, sadness. Okay. So modern psychology, I am not claiming to be an expert on this stuff, okay? It's just I get put here because I have a degree in psychology and I do therapy for people. But I'm sure I'm wrong all the time, and I might be wrong a lot tonight. But I'm just sharing my ideas, my thoughts, okay? So these are not truths. Okay? Truth means like absolutes. They're not. But I'm sharing my thoughts, my discovery. So obviously when I was asked to do this, I find it very, very helpful for me, because I've been involved, I think pretty seriously since 1975. And if I believe that Buddhist system is really a psychology, right? And people would go to a psychologist for dealing with loss and grieving, right? A grief counselor. Then shouldn't Buddhist psychology be able to deal with this too? I think so. Just because maybe it hasn't up to now doesn't mean it can't. We're in transition. And we're at a kind of more mature end of the transition, as opposed to when I was first getting involved. And it was, there weren't many books, there weren't many things published. They're just starting to publish stuff in English, and so it was harder. But I always felt that my teacher, Lama Yeshe, always said, if you can't explain these ideas to your mother, no, I'm mixing Einstein and him. He said you need to be able. Einstein said if you can't explain complex ideas simply, you don't understand them well enough. Okay. Lama Yeshe said you need to be able to explain these ideas to your mother. So that's kind of a standard to hold yourself to, right? It's like something you can just carry around with you, that when we're talking about this. So I really believe that Buddhist thought has most of these kinds of answers, so to speak, but they're not translated and they're not interpreted necessarily yet. That's all still happening. Okay? And a lot of it's happening, but this is my own soapbox. I have a number of soapboxes I always tell people. I think we need to also be careful, because I'm being around kind of long time. I'm much more traditional. Is a lot of stuff that's coming out these days in the name of Buddhist psychology, I don't necessarily resonate with. It might be helpful for people, but to give it that term, I think I'm a little more strict about that. Helping people feel better is not necessarily Buddhist psychology. Okay? It's not. So it's a little bit like you can't judge Buddhist psychology from the form. So, I'm a Buddhist, I meditate. Okay, that doesn't make it. I'm a Buddhist, I do prostrations. I'm a Buddhist, I do mindfulness. I'm a Buddhist. None of it matters. None of it makes you a Buddhist. Buddhist means, like I said in the beginning, it's becoming your own therapist. And then understanding what it means to know your mind, and also why. Understanding one's mind, we could say in the mindfulness movement, people are understanding their mind, but, what for? So it comes down to intention again. Now, there's nothing wrong with feeling good, you know what I mean? There's nothing wrong using those. It's just we wouldn't necessarily call it Buddhist. And you don't have to call it Buddhist. That's fine. I mean, if you're an emergency room nurse, are you care about, what the person's thinking, or are you care about just saving their life right now? You save their life. So there's different levels, so I'm not immune to that or ignorant of that. It's just when you start to get a little deeper and start to call something. Okay, then we have to be a little bit more definitive. So this generalization is modern psychology often focuses on the temporal or immediate relief of pain. What do you think? Though good grief counselors know it takes time to process. Anyone here working as a therapist or counselor? You do. That's right. When someone would come in to see you who's just had a big loss like that, do you have the guts to not immediately try to make them feel better by the time they leave your office? By the way, I don't. I don't want to.
I just try to listen, and if it's very fresh, if it's it's very, very recent, then they're going to be in a lot of pain, and I just offer a space for them to be able to talk about what it feels like, and I do safety. I want to check to see that they've got somebody to talk to.
How do you feel though when it's over? I mean, we're generalizing, so everyone's different,
yeah.
But
it can be kind of heavy.
Yeah, the heavy is a good way. Yeah, good way to describe it. Sometimes you feel kind of helpless.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's really important, and we should talk about that. So that's what I mean by when I say good grief counselors. I mean probably they're all good, but the point is that I think to have courage that you can be with a person's pain and not solve the problem, and it be okay. Now, it might not be okay, but to be in this state of mind where you do your best, what's possible. Now, for a lot of us, it's like, I don't want this person leaving here not feeling better. And that's a bit of a trap. Of course we want that, but it's not necessarily predetermined, and that's not actually the, what's the word I'm looking for? The goal. That is not the goal. Necessarily. We can't say it's not ever. Of course, it could be in that moment, like if the person's suicidal or just so despondent, then of course. Okay, so we'll talk about it a little more. But these are just generally speaking, when I say temporal, now there'll be therapists who will argue with me over that. And that's fair enough. They say, no, I'm looking for long term. But when we talk about long term from a Buddhist psychological point of view, it's different. It's different long term. Okay? And I'm here to talk about that. It doesn't mean, if I was with a group of other people and not asked to be the Buddhist therapist, which is a setup, then I wouldn't, I don't have permission to do that. But here I got permission. This is why we're here, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about the distinctions. Buddhist psychology is less. Can I get some water? Yeah. Thanks. Buddhist psychology is less interested in temporal relief and more focused on the long-term final relief. Okay? Final is the operative word there. It is thought that problems should be looked at and dealt with in the context of development and growing one's awakened, truly healthy qualities. This can be a conflict sometimes for people. Thank you very much. I remember years and years ago when I was living in Nepal, and there was one friend, and she had just heard that, I don't remember who the person was, it was a close acquaintance, had suddenly, I think, got killed. I don't remember how, I don't remember the details. And you could see her face, how people's face, they're just distraught and worried and like concerned. And I remember her rushing up to see Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I think, or Lama Yeshe, but I saw her with Rinpoche. And she's trying to explain it, and Rinpoche's kind of wandering around, he's watering the plants, and he's going in and out of his room, and she's kind of chasing him to get his attention. And if you meet Rinpoche, he's never not attentive. It's not like he's distracted. He kept going, she kept going. And then finally he just kind of smiled and he kind of giggled. Because she had all this drama feeling. And he kind of smiled and kind of giggled, and he said something like, don't worry. And then he just left. Don't worry. How I interpreted that is the drama around what she was very dramatic, and the drama was, you see, as we think about it, and as we move on to this evening, is that it's based on interpretation. Even death, we get captured by our interpretation. Loss is captured by our interpretation. It's nothing more, this sounds brutal, but one way it's enlightening. It's nothing more than a description, a mental narrative. If it was true that we would have to be dramatic, whatever word you want to use, dramatic, emotional, if that was a truth, that all death demands emotional trauma, then every time it happens, every person would be that way. But that's not how it is. So why is it for some times, in some ways, and some people? Why? And a simple answer is, and again, not to minimize it, it's because the way we describe it. There's a lot in that description. It's how I describe that person. It's how I describe their death. It's how I describe our time together, right? We'll go on to that. But just to put that out there right now, that's different. Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I don't know his mind, okay, so it's like that'd be unfair to say. But being with him, around him for 40 years, I've seen enough to know that I've never seen him what appears to... I never see him stray from seeing things as they are, which is as descriptions, not as solid reality. So if we should grieve and get depressed every time someone died, that would be, if that was reality, then we should always do that. But we don't, right? We actually have some level of choice, and as we evolve, we get more choice. And that's what we're talking about tonight. That's the Buddhist approach, is to develop a long-term relationship. So in a way, we are really talking about dealing with a long-term relationship with death. Not a sudden one. Okay? So it's different. When we're talking about the sudden moment the person's in front of you, okay, that's a different conversation. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, yeah.
I was just when someone dies and you have the loss, I mean, the sense that I have is compassion.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, yes, they're crying and carrying on and talking about what it meant to them as a person and how much their life was more complete and how much love there was and memories, I have compassion. So it brings out compassion.
Right.
Isn't that a positive
Yeah.
part of death?
So we'll talk about that, yeah. So the question was just because I think maybe people couldn't hear who are streaming is, what's your name again? Thank you. I did know that. Jandy was saying, who is a therapist, is saying that when she's working with a client or someone who has experiencing grief and loss, that for Jandy, what comes up is compassion. And I mentioned, yes, we're going to talk about that. Interesting compassion. Why? Because the way you describe the experience, interesting. If I can just stay on that thread for a moment, it has to do with how you see the situation. The way you see the situation allows you to generate compassion. Now, that story of the story in Nepal, that was, for that person, the description was some sort of catastrophe. So for her, I think, I'm just projecting, but for her it wasn't compassion, wasn't the mindset that came up for her. It was, kind of freaking out and trauma. Okay? And we're going to talk about this. And by the way, it's possible to work with someone's temporary pain and suffering with the mindset of the long term. They're not mutually exclusive. But working with the short term only might not include the long term. Do you get what I mean? If our focus is real healing. Now, real healing from the Buddhist psychological point of view is different than getting over it. I've been with, I've gone to teachers, my teachers, for problems I have, and, maybe I'm going through something, right? Maybe feeling depressed or something like that. They don't... I generally, when I leave, I do feel better. But it's not that they focus on my depression. They didn't, let's get you feeling better. They didn't... It's like almost they didn't care about that. What they cared about was getting me to see the situation differently. That was more functional, more developmental, more, I don't want to say enlightening, but more developing and enlightened, on that path. They were not interested that I felt better or not felt better when I left the room. I don't think so. I mean, of course they have compassion. So be very clear when we say compassion, what we mean, and we have to talk about that. Compassion doesn't necessarily mean helping the person feel. Remember, people have come to my class on the misleading mind. And I always have that slide of the the guy hugging the snow lion or snow lion. What is it? Albino tiger, right? That's not what we're about. It's not about hugs. You might hug. Okay? Sometimes people need a hug. That's all we can do. But our mindset is not that that's the solution. Of course we'd be affectionate and we'd be warm. Of course we have to be affectionate, warm. But that's not the answer. That's my point. Because we want to focus long term. Lama Zopa Rinpoche and my teachers, Lama Yeshe, they're kind of brutal. They're because they're just so committed to you becoming a healthy, long-term, permanently healthy person. And so it doesn't necessarily, if coddling you, doesn't do that, they won't do it. It's like, oh, you're so mean. It's tough. Buddhist psychology is tough. Once you really start, developing as a therapist. It's not, it's not like, what's that? The thing about pulling the scab off, right? Sometimes it gets to the point where you just start pulling scabs off. You can do it. Not in the beginning, but slowly you build up to that. First what do you use first? A little numbing agent? Okay, so I thought about, this is my thoughts. So it seems to be with loss. There's an event, obviously. And so I was thinking, well, there's before the event and there's after the event. Okay? It seems to me, now there's one quote, and I don't know what, yeah. It seems to me that we get mixed up on this. And it also seems to me, and I just want you to think about this, because I'm not finished thinking about it, but it seems to me, in just sort of our modern, non-spiritual, if I can use that word, approach. By the way, when I say spiritual, I don't mean religious. Spiritual to me, and just to define it again, is a spiritual person or spiritual practice is something one does in order to develop one's inner qualities. Okay? It's not about astrology. It's not about yoga or not yoga. It's not about mindfulness or not mindfulness. People do a lot of mindfulness practices, not really about developing their inner qualities. It's about feeling good. Same with yoga. Same with psychology. Same with Buddhism. Same with meditation. Okay? People meditate to space out a lot of times, to feel good. Okay? So that's not what we're talking about. So it seems to me that a Buddhist approach to this topic is about being prepared. It's pre-event. Okay? This is something really, really different. When we begin our psychological discovery, we have different forms of introspection. Because mind training, so our primary therapy in Buddhist psychology and Buddhist path is mind training. That's now there's different ways to train your mind, many, many, many ways. There are many ways, thousands of ways to train the mind, depending on the person, individual, what stage we're at, what we're doing in that period of our life, and that sort of thing. The primary vehicle to train the mind is meditation, but it's not the only one. So it's just that it's probably the most direct. It's kind of like therapy. The primary form of therapy is talk therapy, but there's other therapies. There's behavioral therapy, and even mindfulness is used in therapy, things like that. So, but without mind training, there's no development. There's not really any development. Little bits, but eventually we have to work on developing the mind. Or as I can't really... Has anything come up? Okay. So pre-event is... So I was saying that when we start to become interested in this path, then a lot of it's about pre-event. It's about actually preparing. And I think generally in our life, we don't do that. I mean, in modern, typical, conventional life, we don't do it. So we're sort of hit with the event. Okay. So pre-event prevention. I like this. I thought that's interesting. Pre-event and prevent. Do you think they're connected? In modern culture, there is no prevention for dealing with grief and loss. Is there?
Well, the hospice movement's trying.
Yeah, but the hospice movement. Let me ask you. So in the hospice movement, aren't they? What's the word I'm looking for? Don't they come into play once someone has had an event, or are they doing prep before the event?
All they need is 2 doctors to say that you have 6 months or less to live.
Right. So that to me is that's great. That's getting pretty close to the event.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about 2 years before, 5 years before? Right. Yeah. But that's good.
Chronic condition, though.
Right. Thank goodness, for the hospice movement, actually. And it's been going for a while, but as it's definitely developing. And as a culture, and again, generalizing, so forgive me for that. As a culture, death is not really considered. So the way about death, we talk about death, people say you're kind of morbid. What's wrong with you? There's, if I go play golf, I can't talk to these guys about death. I'd love to, by the way. I'd love to, because I don't think I can't say scared, but it's a big thing. I want to get ready. Impermanence is not considered. So the fact that things are momentary, it's pretty amazing. Okay, just drop death for a second. I just won't really do it. But it's pretty amazing that everything is momentary, right? Just about everything. There are a few things that are not momentary, but they don't really matter right this moment, okay? I'm talking philosophically, there's a few things. But in our reality, in our world, in our life, everything is momentary. But if you really consider that, then how do you get excited about a new car? Of course, you can have appreciation. Appreciation's fine. Don't get me wrong. We should appreciate it. It's great, what do you call it? Fortune that we can get a car. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the exaggeration onto it. Okay? If you know it's momentary, doesn't that sort of mean it's going to end too? Or doesn't? Does it mean that or not? I think so. Let's put it this way. It may be momentary your whole life. So people might say, no, it doesn't mean you're going to end. It's true. You could have the same house your whole life. That's momentary, right? It's changing moment to moment. Your partner is changing moment to moment. Your kids are changing moment to moment. Your house is changing moment to moment. Your career is changing moment to moment. Your car is changing moment to moment. There's nothing not changing moment to moment. But wouldn't it be amazing if we actually lived with that perception? Do you think it would make things worse or better? I think it'd make things better. The people think, oh, okay, so it's momentary, but let me just enjoy my new Audi, It's momentary. Let's just enjoy the sushi. God, you're such a downer. Right? Right? Let's just enjoy this meal. It doesn't, actually, according to Lama Yeshe, when you see the momentariness of the experience, you enjoy it more. It doesn't exclude enjoyment. It excludes unenjoyment. Is that a word? What is the word for unenjoyment? It's more like an experience. So, like, people think if you perceive the dinner as momentary, then you can't really savor it. You don't enjoy it. And my thought is you actually enjoy it more. The reason it is because our whole existence, we don't see momentariness. So we get stuck on the things, right? And we freeze them. And then they're gone. That is more painful. Whereas, right? Whereas if you're just enjoying the sensation and the pleasure of the meal and like that, it rises and it falls away. Okay, then when it ends, you move on. What a beautiful state of mind that would be. Okay. Cause and effect is not understood. So the reason I threw that one, when I was preparing these slides, that one wasn't in here at first. And I thought, well, that's a central Buddhist psychological theory. Very important one. Okay? So we're a society where death and impermanence are not incorporated in education, values, acceptance. How many people in school or kids, did you guys have a class in death and dying?
In college.
In college? What was the class? Oh, it was an elective.
I didn't take it, but I had a friend who did, and she really enjoyed it.
Ah, Anyone else have a class in death and dying?
Yeah.
Well, right, as a therapist.
Here.
Huh?
Just in here.
Just in here, right?
That was fabulous.
Well, the funny thing is it's a fact, right? Death and dying is a fact. People becoming rich is not a fact, But we spend umpteen hours studying how to make money, going to business school and doing things on the internet and doing online stuff, and getting more, developing our career, and it's not even sure. Why is death? Why no? So death is something that is just not handled. It's a practice of denial. And they think that Buddhists are kind of morbid because we talk about the facts. And my experience, I don't know about your experience, but sure, in the beginning it can be hard, because it's so contrary to what we're culturally and educationally developed. But eventually it helps a lot. Okay? Now, I do want to go back to the event in terms of... Okay, so this is quite important. For those who, like Jandy knows this, right, that people in general come in and it's like... Oh, anyway, we know. Don't you know people who've had loss, and maybe not from you, but they hear that they should get over it? It's been 2 months now. I mean, really? I mean, move on. Start dating. Sorry. I don't know. I'm 74. Start dating. Actually, my father-in-law, one of my favorite people, and his wife, my mother-in-law, also one of my favorite people. She passed away about 4.5 years ago. And he's 90, but he's more energetic than anyone I know. It's really amazing. I don't see... I mean, of course, the body's limited, but you can't see how he'll die. How he'll die. He's got like this... He's got more energy than me. We went to Washington, D.C. last year, maybe a year and a half ago, and it was on his bucket list, and he was, 88, 89 there. And I was sort of apprehensive, because I knew he would outrun me, right? And he wanted to go to 2 museums a day. And I just couldn't think of anything. I was like... And he would have. And he was up in the morning, ready to go, and he had to tolerate us, like, leaving at 10, It's like he was ready to go at 8. But yes, he now has a relationship with a woman. His only relationship before was with my wife's mother. And... yeah, just when I said, go date or something. Anyway, he's very fortunate, I think. Very, very good man. So, so when we have this kind of experience of a loss, and we can take a traumatic one or not, but, people will tell you to get over it, move on. Even if it's the loss of your job, people will say, and you're still stuck in that way, haven't you got a new job yet? And you're just kind of embarrassed to say that you're actually too depressed to look for a job, right? Because, anyway, a lot of reasons. Or it's God's plan. This is God's plan. Right? Your baby died and is in heaven now and is with God, and it's God's plan. It doesn't make you feel any better. No. I don't think, from what I hear, from what I can see. Or people say, it's his karma. It's his karma, it's her karma, it's your karma. Does that help? It doesn't. It makes it worse, yeah. It's your karma. It's kind of like saying it's your fate, but it's a little worse because it's bad experience. So it's like you really did something bad, and now it's okay, now you're experiencing it, right? And you'll be pure of that now, right? Or it's the universe, that's the one. It's the universe speaking to you. Right? or the universe has just, taken him away. Taken him back. I don't know. I have my own philosophy of what really happens, but my point is none of those. Even the correct philosophy doesn't help. Not at that point, right? Now I want to read something here. I had written the page number down, but that's... Here it is. So there's a woman who had lost her, I can't remember how old, but a young, maybe 18-month-old baby or child, toddler. I can't remember how old, but young. And her friend, her closest friend, says, "You're wallowing in your grief, and it's time to get it together and leave that behind you." She says, "The conversation ended with me in tears. Then I sat down and wrote this in my journal, imagining it to be a letter to my friend." She writes, "This is my path. It was not a path of my choice, but it is a path. I must walk mindfully and with intention. It is a journey through grief that takes time. Every cell in my body aches. I may be impatient, distracted, frustrated, and unfocused. I won't want to celebrate anything. I may get angry. I may get angry more easily, or I don't have my glasses on, or I may seem hopeless. I will shed many, many, many tears. I won't smile as often as my old self. Smiling hurts right now. Most everything hurts some days, even breathing. But please, just sit beside me. Say nothing. Do not offer a cure, or a pill, or a word, or a potion. Witness my suffering and don't turn away from me. Please be gentle with me. Please, self, be gentle with me too. I will not ever, quote, get over it. So please don't urge me down that path. Even if it seems like I'm having a good day, maybe I am even able to smile for a moment. The pain is just beneath the surface of my skin. My chest has a nearly constant sinking pain, and sometimes I feel as if I will explode from the grief. Don't tell me how I should be or shouldn't be, doing it or doing that. I should or I shouldn't feel better by now. Don't tell me that, quote, God has a plan for me. Don't tell me what is right or wrong. I'm doing it my way, in my time. I have a new normal now. Oh, perhaps as time passes, I will discover new meanings and insights about what her death means to me. Perhaps one day when I am very old, I will say that time has truly helped to heal my broken heart. But always remember that not a second of any minute, of any hour, of any day passes when I'm not aware of the presence of her absence. No matter how many years lurk over my shoulder, please be kind to me. So, she moves on. I mean, that's a book. So that's towards the beginning of the book. And of course, that's not where she stays, nor where she would think people need to stay. She doesn't think that. There is, I don't know, I don't know what she'd call it, whether there's healing, I'm not sure. But I just want to pass it on that it was important for me to read that too, because I have a lot of ideas, philosophical ideas, and I think what's important there is nothing helps at the raw stage of it, and when you relapse into the raw stage. When I say nothing helps, not exactly true either. one needs to develop perspective. One needs to develop, there's an evolution to it. We have to, the hardest part is when things seem permanent. That's when the grief, the loss, the pain is the strongest. And it kind of helps for people that if they don't say to get over it, but they say, I know you'll get over it. I know you'll feel better someday. Okay? I have this as a last slide, but I'm going to say it now, that a friend of mine, he's a friend, he came to me for help, counseling. And he was in, he was in a major depressive episode. And we worked for a while. And this was not the first time someone said this to me, but I remember distinctly. He's Buddhist. Okay. It doesn't matter. He's human, right? It just depends where we're at. And so he was really depressed for quite a long time. Well, it seemed like eons to him, right? And when he started coming out of it, we could say, or when moving on, he said to me, and like I said, he's not the first person to say this. He said to me, Karuna, I hope this depression doesn't leave me completely. Why would he say that? This is what we're getting to now. Okay? Why he said that is the added thing, or the quality of a Buddhist an awakened psychology point of view. Otherwise, some people do say that who don't, you do hear people say that. Okay? So, when people tell you to move on and, all those things, God's plan, they can't sit with you, right? What's the problem is they're okay the first couple weeks. Okay, so we have to think about ourselves. How are we with those people, too? If we're not the one going through the grief, how are we when someone's showing up and they want to talk, or they just want to sit there and cry, or whatever? I think it's a natural tendency is, to kind of get impatient after a while. And that doesn't do any good. I mean, I don't believe it's good to stay in that state. Of course not. But I have no control over that, right? So the only control I have over is how I'm going to be with that person. And if we're practicing in developing our qualities, the perfect time is when someone's in that place, because the only thing you can really do is be kind. And being kind means, Lama Yeshe once had said to me, he said, we do these water bowl offerings. These bowls is a Buddhist ritual, and it's designed to help, as a practice of generosity. And why we use water is anyone can, you don't have to be rich to offer water, and the water is then visualized as different things. Like flowers and food for all living beings. So anyone can be generous. And he said, he's teaching this to us, and he stopped and he said, you people think generosity is giving your money away. He said, but generosity is giving away your time and giving away your space. And you can feel when someone wants more of your space than you have the capacity to give. You get kind of tight chest, or you think about, how to move them on. Time is the same thing. It's like, oh God, it's just going on forever, right? Same thing again and again. Now, just listening, this is my bias. I'll just share with you. As a counselor, I can't just be a listener counselor. There are people who are. Some people come to me and say, "Yeah, I saw this there. All he did was listen." Right? I mean, that's kind of the model you're talking. So I just have to warn people that I will not just listen. But you have to know when to listen and when you can have an opening, when you have permission. So when when you're working with your family members, friends, all that, wait for the permission, okay? Wait till you hear permission to offer your thoughts. And also, when you give advice, by the way, no one likes advice. Unless they ask for it. And you have to listen very carefully for when, it doesn't come very often, actually. If you really listen, and then you think, God, I told her what to do, and then she still does that. Why? That's why. She wasn't asking for advice, or he wasn't asking for advice. You didn't have permission. Okay? You have to wait for the permission. You can ask if you have permission. That's okay. But you have to ask, and you have to have permission. Okay, so that's our practice, okay, for those of us on the other end of that experience. So when people start, pretty soon you can feel very isolated, you feel very lonely. No one understands, right? That's exactly what you feel. I mean, you really feel like you could be in it with someone, and you try and try and try, and it's almost impossible to find that person. Even someone who's can be in it with you. Well, I mean, they didn't have the same experience, but hangs out with you. Still, you feel it's not quite adequate. You still feel alone. Okay? You still lie awake at night on your own. Okay? You still cry in your car alone. You feel like no one gets it. Okay? And it's true, actually. You don't feel heard, you don't feel understood, and then you can be feeling depressed because you get isolated. You start thinking, I should feel better by now. And then you have this thing, what's wrong with me, right? Even mental illness, I have major depression. And this is where it gets very dangerous, says therapists. This is where therapists go. Because we pathologize the experience. If you think about it, if someone just had a loss, a major loss, and they're feeling sad and depressed, it's like, is that a mental illness? It's because the helplessness of the society, helplessness of the therapists, right? They would think, you shouldn't be that way. Well, I say, yeah, you should be that way. You don't have to be that way, but you're in it. Everyone gets sad. This is everyone's problem. So why would you give a pathologizing label? Major depression. What you're having is major humanness. That's all. That's all you have. And remember we talked about pre-event? So in the Buddhist approach, we prepare. And that's what's missing. That's what's missing for people in this culture, society. Again, generalizing. Very much so. But that's why Buddha cared about our happiness. He started right off, the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering. It's like we don't get it. That's why he taught that first. Because we're so in denial. We're really in denial. We really don't face reality. So, in the truth of suffering, you see, one way of talking about it, people are familiar with this, birth, the 8 sufferings, birth, sickness, aging, death, and the suffering and separating from loved ones, suffering associated with what we dislike, suffering not getting what we want, suffering the 5 aggregates. Why did he teach this? They're called the Four Noble Truths. Okay, they're not called the Four Noble Theories. It's a truth. It's a truth that there's suffering. A lot of it, or consistently. Why are we surprised when someone dies? I've told people who've come to my class, I told about my father died some 13 years, 14 years ago. And it was very, very sad. My mom was holding his feet saying, but this wasn't the plan. Like, this wasn't supposed to happen this way. And for me, it was so sad because it's exactly how it happens. Do we feel, anyone feels sad when we lose a loved one? I'm not saying, you're indifferent or something. You're like a mushroom or something, a mollusk. So don't get me wrong. This is not about being cold. It is sad, but it's how it's understood, how it's incorporated into our life, how we how we make it into something, what it becomes in our life. Okay, that's the difference. So the experience, I will feel sad. This person will feel sad. What it becomes for me, what that person's death becomes for me, will be different for that person who doesn't have, like for my mom. I mean, I don't think she developed, again, projecting, I don't think she developed Alzheimer's right after that. I don't know if there's a connection. But to me, if I had no way of understanding it, and this is 60 years of the meaning of my life, is my marriage and family. Not, that everything surrounds that. Your identity comes from that relationship, right? Not only, but people have, like some people have, their identity is, as a business person or as an athlete or as your career. But many people, their identity is defined by their relationship. And I think maybe before, in my mother's generation, the primary identity was as a successful wife and mother, which meant having a family and healthy kids and educated, whatever, So she did that, and then it reinforced her sense of her identity. So it's in relationship with my father, right? So you lose that, where's the identity that's associated? What happens? So particularly if you're a mother and you lost a child, you're no longer a mother in a sense, right? I mean, of course you are, but you're confused. Am I still a mother, not a mother? Because the way that part of your definition of identity has been lost, because it's an interdependence, right? It's an interdependence. So you lose the thing that the relationship with, boom, it's a void. It's a space. And you go, who am I now? My life is over, right? And people commit suicide. Or they get, really, really, really unhappy. They get depressed for the rest of their life. It's so painful. It's so painful. I mean, really think of it. It's so, so painful. So Buddha was onto it. Death right there. And then, of course, separating, in this case, suffering of separating from loved ones. He didn't mince words. He put it there. So why are we surprised? Now, people go, well, okay, I get that. He put it there. I mean, yeah, that's true. Big deal. Let's go get stoned. Right? I mean, that kind of sucks. Let's go drink, or let's go play golf, or let's, right? Just because it's... So we have to... Yeah, it would be insensitive to not then say, okay, well, what do you do? That would be pretty insensitive. And Buddha was not insensitive. But what he's saying is, don't consider what to do, until you're clear what the situation is, what the facts are. Deal with it. I mean, not deal with it yet. I mean, face it. Face it that this is one level of the relative truth. Doesn't mean it's, there's not some beauty and all those things. It doesn't mean that. But we already know the beauty. That's what we cling to. That's kind of how we deal with these truths. These facts. Okay? So the first way to prepare to prevent is get familiar with this. That's the difference. That's how we should. I don't think young children, I'm not talking about younger, but like teenagers, and why not teach this stuff because well, we know why, but this would be the proper thing to teach people. The facts. And then people say, well, okay, yeah. It's like this. Why are we so surprised? All of us in here, let's say all of us are really close friends. Okay? Really, really close. Then one of us is going to be the last person standing. And we're going to see everyone die in front of us. So it's not just a question of, my partner or my children. It's like everyone is going to die. And the ones, if they don't die, you're going to die and you got to leave them. Same thing. And people go, oh God, that's so heavy. It's morbid. Okay, let's go get stoned. Let's go have a drink. Let's go play golf. Right? So no, we have to figure out there's something to do there. Okay? I can tell you there's not one person that you look at, that you or I have run into, that we interact with, that was, alive 100 years ago. All those people that like our grandparents interacted with, just like we're interacting now, they interacted. They're all gone. Great-grandparents, whatever you want to say. Isn't that amazing? So here we are thinking we're different. And that's how we act, right? That's how we go through life, as if it's not like if intellectually, by the way, intellectually we all agree. We're not talking about intellectually here. We're talking about perception, action, and acting on this. And you might get sad when you confront this stuff. Definitely, I get sad. But, what to do. I'd rather know the facts. Because the other doesn't work. Any questions on the... No? Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So, I'm thinking about knowing the facts is that, what then?
What then? You're right.
Because, even in Japan, you hear about how it's culturally acceptable for doctors not to tell you the bad news about your health.
Right.
So, some people don't want to know the facts.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they know the facts, it could be worse. So I'm confused.
There was a situation, you can ask more. I remember a situation where there was a family that I was asked to talk to. And I think they were Buddhists. Maybe the kids were Buddhists. But there was their father or grandfather was dying, I believe. Was dying, I think cancer. And was in the hospital. And they didn't tell him the results of the tests. So he didn't technically know he was dying. And so they went to their teacher and they asked, should we tell him? And the teacher said no. That, I think, was because you don't want people dying with distress. So maybe he thought that he wouldn't be able to process it. He hadn't enough time to process it and go through the fear. You're right, because most people have fear, but they don't have to stay in the fear. And so hospice, helps us to, move to another level of experience of death. So, generally speaking, I have always made it clear for me, you better tell me. Because, you can't help me with my death. I can only help myself. That's in my case, I might not like it. I'll probably get scared and all those things. So, I think it has, from my point of view, so I think we have to pay attention to what would be the state of the mind. We want the state of mind of the person who's dying to be as happy or peaceful as possible. Now, the way to be happy and peaceful is by confronting it and having the tools to deal. But if you don't have those tools, you don't have the time, then maybe it's not useful. Otherwise, people don't generally have. What do they do? I mean, some people do. They have religion, and but if you don't have, then you're dealing with a tricky situation. But my bias is to have the time and then help people, and that's what hospice is not going to not tell the person, right? But granted, again, there's time. I mean, just by virtue of the fact that they're in hospice, even if it's a week, they have some time. That's how I think of it. Oh, yeah, I hope that question, I didn't repeat your question, but I hope that's clear. The question was about, in some cultures, like in Japan, they don't tell patients the bad news. And so what about that? Kind of like that, right? They don't do it here either, a lot of doctors, because they don't know how to deal with it either. They're uncomfortable, right? Yeah.
I just was wondering, personally and in therapy, there's a lot of work done on relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's one of the richness of our lives is deepening and, making them healthy and make them work. But that's going to be more hard. It's going to make it more difficult to let go. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So the question was a lot of work that therapists do is really defined as working with relationships. And you work on strengthening, improving the relationships, but at the same time, maybe it makes it harder, right? Again, I agree, and that's why it's a tricky job, especially once you become more and more of a Buddhist thinker. I'm not saying Buddhist like some, what do you call it, like religion or dogma. I'm talking about Buddhist in terms of understanding psychology. Okay? So remember your question, because I'm going to go to it. I think I'm going to address it now. The story of the Buddha. And there was a woman whose child died, very, very young. I don't know how. Child died. And she ran around the village asking someone to help her bring her child back. And finally, she was told, well, only the Buddha can do that. You need to go see him. So she went to see the Buddha, and she had the baby in her arms and was crying and explaining that, she had faith in him that he could bring her baby back to life. And he said, well, before I consider doing that, I need you to bring me some, 4 or 5 mustard seeds from a house that has not experienced any death. So she went around everywhere, and of course didn't find it. Came back, said, I don't. And he said, well, that's the reality. Okay? There's no one that doesn't experience death and loss. That's what we forget. So when I was saying, we're all going to, are you ready? You're going to experience it. I won't be asked to teach this one again, will I? I know it's scary. You feel something in your stomach, or chest. But that doesn't get rid of the fact, right? It's a fact. Okay. Some people say, well, we talk about timely death and traumatic death, or what's referred to in Buddhist talk as untimely death and timely death. And so then people try to make excuses like, well, untimely death, is that one you can't get, that's different, blah, blah. Timely death, I can prepare. I know my grandfather's going to die, or blah, blah. It's not different. It is different in terms of the emotional impact, of course. But but it's not different in terms of the facts. The facts are that, let's see if I can get it. Yeah. The fact is death is definite. We don't live with that. If when you say, they go, oh yeah, I know, yeah, it's true, I know, yeah, death is definite. Okay, big deal. Well, the next one's the big deal. The time of death is indefinite. No one knows the time of death. That's why children die. Okay? That's why young people, 40 years old, have heart attacks. Great shape, out for a run, collapse and die. The time of death is not definite. Okay? And so when I say let's face the facts, well, then you say, well, yeah, then what? Well, then what is mind training or spirituality, whatever you call it, is the thing that helps. It's all we can do. We can get ready for our death. We can get ready for our other people's deaths. We can. There's a methodology. We can't teach it here. We talked about some in the death and dying class, right? But we have to work at it because we've worked very long at not doing it. If that makes sense. We've been indoctrinated into believing we'll live forever, and we'll die. It's the time of death, which is indefinite. It's going to be definite. It's going to be when I'm, 91, in my sleep, on my bed. That's how we think, right? And I don't know how many people really die. Actually, it's interesting. I wonder what percentage do die that way. Anybody know?
That's a really good question, though.
Yeah.
Nobody that I've known.
No.
My dad is 92 right now.
Mm-hmm. My mom's 96, and I don't know she keeps going. And my dad was fit. I mean, he was 88, but he swam a mile every day. No, when he turned 85, he gave himself a birthday present, which was he started swimming 1 kilometer every day. And he was playing sand volleyball, which if anyone plays volleyball in the sand, until he was 80. So the guy was, but he had a heart attack. He had a faulty heart, genetic probably, or born with it, whatever. Who knows? People say it wasn't his time. So that's one thing. Death is definite. The time is indefinite. We begin to work with that. We meditate on it. We use that as part of our mind training. Now, when we use the word meditate, I always mention this. The word in Tibetan, I don't know if it's Tibetan or Sanskrit, but I know in Tibetan is to become familiar. Okay, so if you think you're meditating and you're not becoming familiar, you're not meditating, according to this system. Doesn't mean you're doing something bad necessarily. But this mind training means to become familiar. Familiar with what? Your mind. How it functions and reality. Becoming familiar with death. Many things to become familiar with. It's all mentally, the connection is with our mental. So it's actually like, have you ever meditated on your death? That seems weird. So everyone's going to die. We're going to die. We don't know when, and we never meditate on it. We never just reflect on it. And maybe reflect a little bit. And then you go, oh, that's kind of morbid. Let's, whatever. And then people say, Karuna, you really want me to dwell on my death? It's like, well, it's not dwelling. It just is. I want you to become familiar with it. Become friends with it. Are you ready? If it happens tomorrow and you knew today, are you ready? Do you know what it means to be ready? I mean, that's even a big question. God, this is really a bummer of a downer class, isn't it? I'm trying. I have more slides. I'm trying to get to the good stuff. This is my way. I think people who know me know that I'm kind of like into suffering and stuff like that.
I was going to use your joke. Well, we can all get stoned afterwards.
Right, there you go. It's only a half hour more. So, so the other part is death is definite. Impermanence is a fact also. There's a lot of facts that we don't face, but I think in terms of this grief and loss topic, we should become familiar with impermanence. And impermanence just means there's manifest there's gross, or what we might refer as manifest impermanence. We know that our car gets older. We know that our the food spoils, that kind of stuff. But we don't know about subtle impermanence, and we don't know that the mind is impermanent too. Okay, so the mind is impermanent. Everything's impermanent. There's a few little things, a few things that are not, but not really worthy right now for our conversation. Everything is momentary. Okay, so what happens? This is the problem. Nothing is definite, actually. So the fact that one's child dies or one's partner dies at 40, we think so surprised, but no, we're telling you now, no, it's not definite. Don't get too. Is that word sanguine? Is that the word? Sanguine? Sanguine? It means complacent, right? Don't get complacent. You're gonna, you don't know what's gonna show up. Shandy?
Suicide, how does that fit in here? Because someone decided to take their life. It isn't a matter of, it's indefinite for the person that cares about.
Suicide.
But how?
It's still indefinite. Well, it's a traumatic death. It's not a timely death. What's your question, though?
I guess I just wondered how it fit in. It doesn't feel as, you say it's not, we can't determine it, but somebody did. Somebody decided to take their life. And
But when they were born, even up to maybe a few days before, it wasn't definite, right? Even up to the time when they, probably just a few hours before, it's not definite. And even it's interesting, I don't know about this, but people try to commit suicide, and it doesn't work. So, suicide's a whole big it's a whole topic. Yeah, but even still, it looks like it's but they didn't. It's very hard to commit suicide, actually. When I say hard, to get into that mental space where you do it. You're in a lot of pain, and then actually then do the act is not easy. It's not easy to get there. It's like, it's not easy to kill someone either. It's a lot of work. Okay, so this is where we get to the prep time. Okay? You got the facts. The degree of suffering, the pain that we experience in loss is relative to the degree of attachment and clinging. Okay? Our level, of course we're going to have attachment, okay? No. Our goal is to be non-attached. But it takes time, maybe a whole lifetime. But we can improve. If we know that that's the problem, then we can begin thinking about it and working with it. And people will say, well, how can I love my wife if I'm not attached? How can I love my kids if I'm not attached? That's not understanding. Love, and this is you mentioned, you brought it up earlier about compassion. Compassion and attachment are not the same thing. In fact, they're kind of opposites. So, myself as a counselor, I've had what's the word? Like crises. Because I was sitting with someone, like you're talking, I remember distinctly like this young couple. And they were kind of all cuddly in the office and all kissy face and all kind of, gooey. And I was really uncomfortable. Maybe it's because I was, had problems. But part of why I was uncomfortable is I felt, oh my God, they're setting themselves up. They're so clingy. And so everything was beautiful. It's one thing to be in love, that happens, but it's when it's just like kind of over the top. They were so in love. Okay. Where are they today? This is probably 15 years ago. I don't know how long ago. Unfortunately, it's not the right way to say it. They had 2 Down syndrome children. He started drinking again. They divorced. She moved back to another country. You know, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. Maybe that's why I didn't like the clinging part, because it's not definite. You don't know what's impermanence, right? Impermanence. I'm not saying they had all that happen because they were so in love. I'm not so clingy. I'm not making that's not the cause. I'm just saying that, you know, buyer beware. It's better to be informed. Of course we have attachment to our kids. Of course we have attachment to our partner. That's not, you know, we're going to, because until we develop, okay, so here's the big deal. There is the goal in Buddhist mind training. Everything is designed. Okay, this is going now deeper into the philosophy. Is designed to perceive reality. Everything else is problematic. Now, there's degrees of problem. Some problems are better than others. Okay, like the problems we have as in general, you know, in America, or, you know, as middle class, or, you know, people here. Those problems are much better than the problems they're having in Syria. Okay, we're all humans, but some problems are better. So we should, you know, we have to be grateful, all those things. But we will always have problems. The solution, the cure, is to develop our minds where we see reality. So we don't see reality now. Now this is not the full picture of reality, but what if we saw things, just that one fact about everything being momentary, transient. We don't see things that way. Okay, I'm just generalizing, you don't either. The fact is, everything's moving here. These atoms are moving, right? The light is moving, the sound is moving. Well, that's all atomic. Everything we see, hear, smell, taste, or feel is atomic. And we know from science that atoms are constantly in a state of movement. Do you see that? I don't. Now, add one more thing. The mind itself is also moving. So we say, for example, you know, I love her. I just love her so much, you know. And I'm not putting that down, but when you think about it, what happens is, you and I, when I say you, I mean me too. What happens is, you see the person as fixed and permanent, not impermanent like she or he is. Now, this is not the deepest level of reality, by the way, but it's a good beginning. If we saw that person is moving moment to moment, which they are, you know, their emotions are also moving moment to moment because that's part of their mental makeup. Where do you get attached? If you have some smoke going by, can you put a Post-it on it? You can't, can you? Because it's moving, right? It's ethereal, right? Or, you know. Well, actually, our bodies are the same way. In fact, science says the same thing. I don't know why we see that pillar is so solid. It doesn't make sense to me, because it's mostly not. Right? You're a scientist, right?
Mostly space.
Isn't it? How much percentage of it's space?
Oh, I don't know, but more than 99%.
Exactly. More than 99% of that pillar is space. I read once, I don't, it's just kind of a cute way of saying it, that they said if you could take all the space out of all the matter in this universe, now I don't know how big the universe is, would be a 9-foot cube. Okay? We don't see that. We don't see that pillar is 99% space, which it is, and why are we unable to walk through it? Why are we unable to walk through the pillar? Because of the 1% matter? That doesn't make sense. And we're 99% space too, right? Our bodies. Very little matter. It has to be similar.
It's because it's moving.
Is it because it's moving? The smoke is moving. We can walk through that. In fact, because it's moving, we should be able to.
Well, if I have a jump rope and I'm going like this.
Ah.
walk through it because it's moving. So
But if you saw the movement, you could easily jump at the right time, because your mind would be so clear and slow and still. Do you know what I mean? Because there is a lot of space in that jumping rope, right? It's just because our perception sees it as solid. Like even looks solid, right? When you do it fast enough. Yeah. But it's not. It's still perception.
it has to do with how long the image can persist in your eye. And
Right.
How it looks.
How long the image persists in the eye is how it looks. But that's not how it is.
Right. That's why we can.
Do you know why we can't go through walls and pillars?
Why, Karuna?
Next class, I'll tell you. Because of our perception. That's all. It's only our perception, which is valid, But if you don't, okay, I don't want to get too out there, but I have to say this.
Oh, go for it.
Thank you. As the person trains his or her mind, this is what's so amazing. That the level of training is phenomenal. What the mind can do, we haven't developed it at all. So for the practitioner, this is true. I mean, according to the text, when you see reality, not just impermanence, but the deeper meaning of reality. The deeper meaning is that things don't exist the way they appear. They appear as truly existent, solid things. That's not how they are. When that practitioner has a direct perception of that, through training his or her mind for a long time, but then it becomes, all of a sudden you see reality. That person can walk through walls. It's only the first level of 10 levels. He or she might be practicing those 10 levels for ages, eons. But once he or she has that experiential perception, because you also develop the conceptual perception before you have the bare perception or the experiential perception. When you develop the conceptual perception, the world starts changing for you a lot. It's never the same again. But you haven't yet, eventually you'll have the direct perception. Once you have that direct perception, you still have 10 levels to go before you're a fully enlightened being. It's like, okay, you're still a beginner. And you can walk through walls. It makes sense. It's only the mind that prevents us from walking through the pillar. So, going back to grief and loss. It's kind of fun, isn't it? It's much more fun than grief and loss. But, so what's happening in reality, we can't do much with this, but just so you know, the end game is the person that we're grieving about, or the career we just lost, or the home, doesn't exist that way. If we saw how it really existed, we wouldn't stick to it. We wouldn't cling to it. We wouldn't see, what happens when I see you, without trying, I stick to you. That's called attachment. That's the real meaning of attachment. So please understand, attachment doesn't mean, oh, I love him so much, and I love coffee so much. That's attachment, okay, in the common use of the word. But in the psychological use of the word, the attachment happens every instant. Okay, because we see things as solid and they're not. We see things as permanent and they're not. And because I see my dog as permanent, I am attached to it. I can't help it. But there's levels of attachment too. Okay? So we just want to slowly work with it. Okay? If you think about when you leave, you think about some times when you're around people who are more dramatic. Very helpful to think, how are they seeing it? Well, they see, they're seeing it much more solid, and they put much more interpretation on the thing. Remember my story about Lama Zopa Rinpoche when he was swimming in the lake? You have to go to one of my earlier recordings. So Rinpoche was and Lama Yeshe were visiting. We're on a bit of a break, staying at a friend's house in Massachusetts, maybe up by Walden. Walden Pond, is that what it's called? Yeah. And they went swimming in the lake. And there were, I don't know, several people, and Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa. And at some point, someone noticed, well, where's Rinpoche? They couldn't see him. And then they looked. He saw a hand just coming up out of the water, going like this. That's how you shout when you're underwater or something. Okay? And so this my friend Tim. He swam over and he rescued Rinpoche. Rinpoche came up laughing. He talks about today, about how Tim saved his life. And all. He could be like that because no attachment, right? Yeah. So we can get there. The great meditators, they die with happiness. They do. And that's a different story, and we can talk about that's pretty deep, more deep philosophical stuff. Okay, so clinging and attachment's the issue that gets us in trouble. Okay? So there was a study done. I have the study, but I didn't reread it, so I don't know exactly when. It was some years ago. Some psychologists who were studying the impact of post-traumatic stress disorder amongst Tibetan refugees. And if you don't know, the situation in Tibet has always been bad, but earlier maybe it was worse. I don't know. Anyway, there are periods when it was worse. So there's a period in the early times when there's a lot of torture going on. I think everyone was practically tortured who was thrown into prison, and a lot of who was thrown in prison were monks and lamas and nuns, especially picked on. And so these psychologists were, I think 3 of them were doing a study. They were going around to different refugee camps and interviewing, survivors and checking for the different signs of PTSD, like, flashbacks and poor sleep and anxiety and things like that. And they had a interesting problem because the incidents, the occurrence of those markers, the psychological indicators, used to diagnose PTSD, for example, were very low. They couldn't figure it out. So they actually had an interview with His Holiness Dalai Lama. And they asked him, do you have an idea why this is, this is unusual for us? We've done, they've done studies, or there were studies, of course, in many different kinds of refugees, around the world. And do you have an understanding why it might be low, those indicators? And His Holiness said, well, it could be because 2 reasons. He says the first one is that we're a culture that it believes in cause and effect, karma. Everyone believes in it. It's just a cultural value, or cultural, what do you call that? Value, I guess, belief. And so when people would be in the prison camps or being tortured, they knew that they had created the cause. He said, of course, they felt the great pain and whatever they went through, but there was that extra element that they had created these causes to experience that trauma, that grief, that loss. And then he said, and then in special circumstances, particularly with lamas, not only, but you could see there was an extra thing that happened where, of course, they're also trained in seeing one's enemy as your friend, because they're helping you to practice and develop compassion. And it's clearly understood that compassion is the source of happiness. Compassion and wisdom. The wisdom I was talking to you before about understanding reality. Not the second, but the other half of that is developing great compassion. Not just compassion, but great compassion. It's different than just compassion. So when they'd be tortured, I mean, they felt all the pain, all that stuff. I mean, it's possible some didn't, but that doesn't matter. That they were experiencing their tortures with a view of compassion. Can you believe it? And it's true. This is taught in our practice. That we're to see our enemies as our friends, and we're to see difficult circumstances as our teacher, as ways to develop. Now, not all the levels of Buddhist approach. It's a little bit more advanced. We start working with those ideas, but not on the beginning levels. So, it's kind of a joke, but someone who just had loss, you don't tell them, oh, this is great. You got to develop compassion. But for someone who has already, so now it's all about preparation. It doesn't mean, if you've prepared and you hear these ideas, and then you're going in your event, you might not be any different than anybody else at that first point, but you will get better. You will. And the end point is better, if you know what I mean. I mean, not like there's an end point. Okay, it's all about how we story, if you want to put it in narrative terms, it's all how we story the experience, right? But we can't story the experience in a really meaningful way so easily if we haven't prepared and it fit our mindset, our view. It's a lot harder when you're in the pain and you go, okay, yeah, I just read this thing about karma. Yeah, it's my karma. It doesn't help that much. It's better than not having, but if you want to feel good, it's not going to probably work. But so it's better to prepare, is my point. And the preparation is around understand. Oh, so I just mentioned that was the study's finding: cause and effect, and compassion. And I had the great fortune to have some relationship with Tibetans. And I don't know, maybe I'm just romantic, but it seems I never heard this. I mean, I'm sure maybe they're just polite. I never heard this anger and hatred of the Chinese. Pretty phenomenal. I'm sure there are, people, Tibetans who, have hatred or whatever. But I'm saying, generally, I never heard it. Why? If you understand cause and effect, then it's a little hard to hate the person when you created the cause for them to torture you. Doesn't mean you felt good. Doesn't mean you love them, maybe, or whatever. An advanced practitioner would feel love for them. There's many reasons to feel love for that person, which we won't go into now. Okay, because so as a person moves through the grief, eventually, or if you're like preparing now, and then it's about the thought to develop from the experience. Because as a mind trainer, we have to use every experience to develop. So it's about, the reason why people have a problem with this is there's no value, there's no principle that I'm need to develop myself inwardly. If you have that, then it's not a big leap to begin to understand that difficult problems, difficult situations are what develop us the most. And when I say develop, I'm not just saying, I'm going to be a better person. I mean, it's really like I really, really, really want to develop great compassion. I really believe it's a way for me to be happy and to help the world. You really believe that. And I really, really, really want to develop understanding of reality. So problems, difficulties help the most to do that, by the way. So it's only once we've committed, then we can talk about this way of working with the experience. So then you start thinking, what do you want to become? So you study and think, like for me, I want to become Bodhisattva, or I want to become a Buddha. When you study up, guess what? Can't do it without facing problems. Without experience. When I say experiencing, because you're going to experience them anyway. But without, so now you have a chance to use them as to train and develop these qualities that we have. And if you know, like, really nice people, compassionate people, kind people, I think if you interview them, for the most part, a lot of times it came from difficulties, you know, not from entitlement, not from ease. Okay, and then you make the determination that you open up to the experience as best you can. Okay? And if you're working with other people who are going through this you just got to be very, very, sensitive. Okay, they might not be able to do this. Or not, it's certainly not in the beginning necessarily, unless they've already prepared and think like this. Okay, so it's 2 minutes to 9. I didn't get to the everything, but I don't want to rush. There's only a few more points. You do need to sit with the experience, allowing yourself to be curious, a learner. Okay? And this is very important. You first develop kindness and warmth toward yourself, then extend it to others. So the real healing comes when you start having compassion for others. And that we won't go into detail now. But it doesn't mean you don't have compassion for yourself. That's very important. You're not denying yourself. You are others also. If you know what I mean. You know, you're one of everyone. And you can't really feel kindness towards others unless you really have some sense of kindness to yourself. So I often tell people, if you, it's hard to word it. Let's say Jandy, you're my client, and you're going through you're in distress, but you're working with it. And then I say, so Jandy, if you put yourself on that couch over there, what are you going to tell Jandy? What are you going to tell her? And people will go, before that, they're saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. People say I should be over it. And then you put yourself over there. What are you going to tell Jandy? And I always say, take your time. Be nice to yourself. It's okay. It's hard. You know what I mean? They're so kind to themselves when they're outside of themselves. They need to be that way in themselves. Okay. If I was someone else looking at me, what would I give you? Gazing at yourself as if you are another. Do that a lot. And then do it. The wisdom people have is, I've no doubt how wise people are if you help them access it. Okay, 1 minute after 9. See you later. Are there any questions? Anything else? Nothing online, huh? Yes.
I have a couple of friends who they've had a lot of losses, and they've both been diagnosed by therapists as having PTSD because of like a lifetime of losses.
Oh yeah.
And so, and they're coming from Judeo-Christian backgrounds.
Right.
And I don't want to be like them, so that's why I'm here.
Oh, right. Question was, well, it wasn't a question. It was a statement that she has many friends, 2 friends in particular, who've been through a lot of loss. Probably it sounds like more loss than many people. And they are sort of dealing with post-traumatic stress symptoms. And you said you didn't want to be the same. You don't have to be the same. Because we all are going to go through loss. I think and pain and suffering. So it's about developing a different relationship with it. It doesn't mean, oh yeah, I want to have, very advanced maybe people want to have problems, but generally we don't want to have problems, but you have them. We're in it. We're in it. And it's really important we don't let them define who we are. It's something that's happening. It's not something who we are. And so it's really, as much as possible, to be objectifying it, and then you can work with it much easier. Once it, So there's an emotion that comes up, maybe sadness, whatever, and that emotion, and then the functional way to deal with it, the dysfunctional way, what happens for people is the emotion, sadness, it morphs into our identity. So when we say I'm sad, we feel in actuality that we are sadness. That's a very unhealthy that's an unhealthy mind. Okay? So we can begin by saying, I have sadness. It's a linguistic trick, but it's not really meant just to be that, is where I have sadness. Okay? As we get very advanced, you won't even have the sadness. I mean, very advanced, okay? But anyway, we never are probably not going to get to having no sadness, but that's okay, the sadness, because that's where my friend said, I hope this depression never leaves me totally, because that becomes the teacher, where it keeps you alive, it keeps you sensitive to other people's reality. That's why he didn't want, the first time in his life, I think, he felt compassion. Compassion arises when we yield to our own pain. I'm not sure about the word yield, but when we open to our own pain. The only way to develop compassion, actually. Otherwise, it's just intellectual. And we know people who we feel are compassionate. They're always like they've been through this or something like that. So you don't have to be. The way not to become like them is to be open to your pain, and open to it in a way that's objectified a little bit. It's scary, but just staying in a place where the pain is there, but I'm just going to watch you, I'm going to learn from you, I'm curious. I don't like you particularly, but I know you're more than the way I like you or don't like you.
So don't let it become part of your identity.
Exactly. That's where people don't let it become part of your identity. When it becomes part of your identity, those are the people you see on the street who are downtrodden and bent over or not happy. It's not part of our identity, but we can make it part of our identity. That's the problem with certain therapists. Because once we say, you're depressed, or even say you have PTSD, very hard to have a label and not become it. That's the downside. Now, sometimes a label helps people. Oh, I know what I got now. Okay. But if you work with it too much, you become it. Or you feel like you become it. Okay? Something else? Yes.
I know we talked about some strategies and not to become it. However, would you say we'd try the same strategies if we're trying to kind of undo a loss that maybe occurred a long time ago, and then other things will come up and may not be related, but it'll re-trigger back to that really intense loss that you may have had? Like how to work through something like that.
So it's about how to work through those images that arise and experiences, emotions that happen from a loss a long time ago.
For example, I had a major loss when I was a teenager, probably too young to really know how to process that healthily.
Right. So if when you have, she had a major loss when she was a teenager, and it's not uncommon, right? It happens, yeah. The way to work with it, I think, is, see, some people say, they go back to the experience. Let's work with the experience. Generally, I don't think that's helpful. I'm not talking about denial, but generally it can be helpful to re-story it, but you can't change the event. That happened. But if your narrative around it was, she hated me, that's why she left me, or something, right? There can be all kinds of narratives. So you can change the narrative. Okay, you can't change the event. Second thing is, and that's the problem when we're young. Not just when we're young. If you have a strong emotional, relate to very strongly emotionally, that also reifies or solidifies the narrative. So it's one thing to be sad. It's another thing to be, completely overtaken by the grief. Okay. Second thing is, what the good news is it actually what's coming up for you, it's just coming up now. I mean, it's just in the now. Do you know what I mean? It feels like you're processing the past. Oh, here it comes again, or like that. It's not. I mean, it's related, but the way that you'll get rid of it is to when it arises, to sit with it, but not become it, not begin engaging, and then realize it's just emotion arising. It's like, remember we talked about the mind being impermanent? All it is parts of the mind are arising. Imprints are arising. So they will go away if you don't. It's like, okay, let's say you have some memory or something comes up, and you go, I hate having this memory, right, or something like that. Oh, this feels so painful, whatever it is. So what happens is we're creating more imprints. So my advice is those might be painful memories, images, whatever they come up, but you just allow them to come up. Say thank you so much. You just let it go. Not let it go like you let it go. They will be let go. When we engage with them, they become reified. They become new ones. And this may go on for a long time, but they will go away. Yeah, I mean, the disturbing ones. The other thing, you won't lose your memory of the person and that you can't do that, because some people say, oh, well, I won't remember my child or whatever, or my husband. That's ridiculous. How can you not remember, right? I mean, I guess it's possible. But that we don't want to not remember the person. We love the person if it's someone we loved. If it's a traumatic thing, then just the whole description around it, the narrative around it will shift. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to do it well, we have to train the mind better. To train the mind better, we got to become more focused. To become more focused, you have to practice some meditation techniques, mindfulness like that. But those are just tools. They're not the end.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We all have that, by the way. All have that. We have to begin to see it objectively. Okay, more and more objective. When we see it objective, they can't hurt you anymore. It's only when we feel that they're on us. They are us, but they're not. They're just images, just stuff, smoke. If you get really good, they don't even exist anymore. Like they can come up and you just see they don't even exist. Like that. I mean, not really. You see them as like dreams. When we're dreaming, and if you were having those experiences, we get all stressed, right, or scared. But if you're in the dream, you say, "Oh, I'm dreaming." They don't bother us, do they? So it's the same thing. So when you're going through, say this is just like a dream. These are just. But the reason they hurt and our problem is because we see them as real, solid, self-existent. It's not that they're not there, but they're not there the way they appear. And that's why we're caught by the way they appear. I'm so messed up. Oh, not those memories again. Yeah. Okay. So I think you should send out an email asking what they want to do, people want next time. Okay? Okay, thank you, everybody. I think let's so we can still, maybe we didn't set a good intention, so we can dedicate this energy, sort of like, okay, we created all this money, but it's going to the college fund. It's can't go to that trip to Hawaii. Okay, so at this thing, we did create a lot of energy. We did create many imprints, all of us together. Even people who are not in the room, we're connected now. And so these imprints will ripen. There's no doubt, 100%, definite. They will ripen. We don't know when. So then we just think, may they ripen. When they ripen, I dedicate this energy that they ripen as developing a clear, wise, and compassionate mind and person, so that's the way that I can be. It's the only way I can help others make a better world, and to help people who are so sad because they don't know this and they're going to experience loss, they're going to experience death, and they don't have the information. So I'm going to give them the information. Okay, thank you. And Urs, will you write the people who are thanking me here? Can you thank them for me? Thank you, people who are writing in. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate everyone joining. I mean, it's for me. I think I'm the one that benefits the most. So I have to. Yeah. Okay.